Ginger hangs thick in the air of a kitchen that isn't mine. A woman in a charcoal suit drops her briefcase in the doorway and stops breathing. I can feel her staring at my back. She hasn't moved in 20 seconds. She is the older sister of the man who was supposed to marry me 3 weeks ago. Her hands come up slow, land on my waist through the sweatshirt I borrowed from her closet. Her forehead rests against my shoulder blades. She exhales like a woman finally setting down something she has carried for 2 years. I keep stirring the pot. I do not turn around. Not yet. This story is intended for adult audiences. Listener discretion is advised. If you love sapphic slow burns like this one, check the description. There is more waiting for you there. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. And if quiet, careful love stories are your thing, subscribe. There is a new one waiting for you every week. 3 weeks before that kitchen, I was standing in a bridal suite in front of a vanity, holding a bouquet of white roses and eucalyptus. I had picked them with my grandmother in October, when she was still well enough to come to the florist's with me. She had touched the eucalyptus leaves and told me they looked like the bush in her mother's garden in Cebu. I had almost cried in the shop. I had not cried. I had brought my grandmother home and made her tea. I set the bouquet down on the vanity with both hands. The way you set down something expensive. The junior coordinator stood at the door. Her hands were doing that small, uncertain thing where the fingers will not stop finding each other. Behind her in the corridor, I could hear footsteps, heels on hardwood, moving with a specific economy that I recognized before I saw the person attached to it. Linnea Ashford walked through the door. She was in a gunmetal gray suit. She had been in that suit all morning. She was 36 years old, a corporate attorney in her brother's family, and she had been the first person in that family to greet me 2 years ago at the engagement dinner. The only one in 2 years who had ever asked me a question about myself that did not have to do with wedding logistics or the catering budget. She looked tired in a way I had never seen her look tired. Her eyes went to the coordinator, then to me, then to the coordinator again. "You can go," she said to the girl. Her voice was level, low, surgical in its ordinariness. "You do not need to be the one to say it." The coordinator left. Linnea closed the door behind her with the same precise motion she used for everything. The small efficiency of a woman who did not waste movement. She did not move from the door because she knew, in the way that attorneys who have delivered bad news to clients for a decade know, that the person in the room needed the distance before she needed anything else. "Tell me," I said. She did not soften it. That was the thing about Linnea. She did not soften things. She had told me once, over coffee after a family brunch last spring, that softening bad news was the thing that made it worse. I had thought at the time that she was being harsh. I understood now, standing in a bridal suite with my bouquet on the vanity, and my mother downstairs checking on my grandmother, that she had been telling me the truth that mattered. "Ben is in the groom's suite," she said. "Brielle is with him." I did not understand the sentence. The words were ordinary, and I heard them in the order she said them. And the thing they were telling me did not connect for a full second, maybe two. And then it did. Brielle was my cousin. Brielle was my cousin who had flown in from the West Coast on Wednesday to be one of my bridesmaids, who had stood next to me at the rehearsal dinner last night in a navy dress, who had hugged me at the hotel this morning and told me I looked beautiful. "The door," I said. "Locked," Linnea said. "I saw them when I was coming up the back stairs. I did not go in. I came here. I did not mean to sit down. My body had decided without consulting me, and the chair by the vanity caught me. And I was sitting in a wedding dress in a room with 20 minutes of quiet left on the clock." "How long?" I said. "I do not know," Linnea said. "You know something." A pause. Her jaw moved once. She was not looking away. I noticed that. She was looking directly at me because she had decided that looking away would be an insult to the moment, and she was not going to insult this moment. "I have suspected for 3 months," she said. "I did not have proof. I was not going to accuse my brother of something I could not prove. And I was not going to tell you something that would destabilize your wedding based on suspicion. I am telling you now because I saw them with my own eyes. and there is no suspicion left. 3 months, I said. I know. You should have told me. I know, she said. I am not asking you to accept that I made the right choice. I made the choice I thought I could live with at the time. And I am telling you now, on your wedding day, that I was wrong. I looked at the bouquet on the vanity, white roses and eucalyptus. I thought about my grandmother in the front row downstairs, 91 years old, who had flown in from Cebu and did not know yet. I thought about the 212 people in the ceremony space. I thought about my father, who had not said a full sentence to me in a year, and had still bought a plane ticket from Manila. I am not going down there, I said. No, Linnea said. I am not going down there and telling them. No. Who tells them? Her jaw moved again. I will, she said. You are not going to tell my grandmother. Your mother will tell your grandmother. I will tell my parents. The coordinator will handle the guests. The specific wording is not your concern. I stared at her. This woman, who had walked into this room 15 minutes after seeing her brother with my cousin in a locked room, had already structured a plan for handling 212 people. And she had decided that my job in this moment was to not be responsible for any of it. Why are you helping me? I said. She looked at me for a long second. Because it is the right thing to do, she said. And because my brother is not going to. And because my parents are not going to. And because you deserve to have somebody in this building on your side today. And I am the person in this building who is on your side. I did not cry. I remember being surprised at not crying. I remember thinking that the crying would come later, in some room that was not this one. Whatever part of me was still functioning had decided to postpone it until the privacy was real. What do you need me to do? I said. Sit, she said. I will bring your mother. I will have the coordinator bring a bag for your things. We will walk out the back. My mother came in. She was crying before she reached me. Linnea had told her in the hallway, which was the correct thing to do, because my mother had needed the crying to happen in a space that was not in front of me, and Linnea had given her that space. My mother reached me and she put her hands on my face and she said, "Anak," and that was all she said. I held her for a long time. I still did not cry. Linnea came back with a duffel bag I had not seen before. "This is from my car," she said. "There are clothes in it. They will not fit you perfectly. They will fit enough for today. The coordinator will handle the dress," Linnea said. "It will be couriered to wherever you want it sent. You do not have to look at it again." "Okay," I said. I changed in the bathroom. I took the pins out of my hair and left them on the counter. My mother helped me with the zipper at the back, because Linnea's hands were busy on her phone in the other room, already handling things. I put on a pair of gray sweatpants that were too long, and a soft black pullover that smelled like the particular cedar and citrus thing that was Linnea's apartment when I had visited last spring. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, and the woman looking back at me was not the woman who had been standing in front of the vanity half an hour earlier. I understood that she was not going to be that woman again. Linnea drove us out through the service lot. My mother sat in the back with her arm around my shoulders, and Linnea handled the car the way she handled everything. Unhurried, precise, with one hand on the wheel and the other on the center console. And she did not make either of us talk. She took the back roads. She took us to her apartment building, which was 15 minutes from the country club, in a neighborhood I had only been to once. She parked in the underground garage. She walked us up in the service elevator so we would not have to see the doorman. Her apartment was what I remembered from last spring. White walls, dark floors, a long window that looked out over the park, the specific clean smell of a place where someone lived alone and well. She showed my mother to the guest room. She set the duffel bag on the dresser. She said, "There are towels in the bathroom, and there is tea in the kitchen, and there is food in the refrigerator. I am going to be in the living room on my phone for the next 2 hours, and I am going to handle everything that needs to be handled, and you do not have to be part of any of it." She closed the door and left us there. My mother cried it. I let her. I held her while she cried, and I stroked her hair the way she had stroked mine when I was a child with a fever. I understood that I was going to have to be the adult in this room today because she could not be. I understood also that Linnea Ashford was in the next room being the adult for both of us, which was the strangest piece of information I had received all day, and there had been a lot of strange information. My mother fell asleep eventually. She had been at the country club since 7 in the morning. She was 68 years old. She had cried herself into the kind of exhausted quiet that only comes after something enormous. I tucked my mother under the guest room blanket, and I kissed her forehead, and I closed the door softly behind me. Linnea was in the living room. She was on the phone. She had taken the suit jacket off, and it was draped over the arm of the leather chair, and she was in a charcoal gray shirt with the sleeves rolled once at the forearm. Her hair was loose, which was something I had not seen before. I had only ever seen her with her hair pinned in every professional context. Loose, it was dark and slightly wavy from being contained all day, and it fell against her collar in a way that made her look less like a corporate attorney and more like a person. She glanced up when I came in. She finished the call. "I will call you tomorrow," she said to whoever it was, and hung up. "Your father is on a flight back to Manila tomorrow morning," she said. "I got him on an earlier one. He wanted to come here, and I told him no, that you needed the night, and he accepted that. He asked me to tell you he loves you. He cried on the phone. I am telling you so you can decide whether to call him tonight or tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I said. "Okay. My grandmother, she's at the hotel with your aunt. Your aunt is staying with her tonight. She has been told that the wedding is not happening. She has not been told why." "Ben," I said. Linnea's jaw moved once. "Ben is at our parents' house," she said. "I drove Brielle to the airport myself on the way back to the country club. Her flight is in the morning. I told her that if I saw her in the city again before you were ready to see her, she would be seeing my legal practice and not my face." I stared at her. "Brielle is your cousin," she said. "I understand that. I also do not care. She is not my problem. Ben is my problem. My parents are my problem. You are the person in the situation who deserves not to have to be anyone's problem today, and I am going to make sure that is what happens." I sat down on the couch. I put my face in my hands. I did not cry. I understood dimly that I was going to cry eventually. Probably tonight. Probably in the guest room. Probably alone. But not yet. Linnea did not come to sit beside me. I noticed that. She stayed in the leather chair with her phone in her lap, and she gave me the distance that a person in my situation needs, which is the distance of someone who is in the room with you but is not trying to be closer than you can handle. I said, "Thank you," she said. "You do not have to thank me," I said. "I do. I am thanking you." A silence. She said, "Okay." I lifted my head. I looked at her across the room, in the charcoal gray shirt and the loose hair and the suit jacket draped over the chair arm. I thought about the fact that I had been going to marry her brother in an hour, and that this woman, this specific woman, had decided to be the person in that building who was on my side, and had been on my side since she had come up the back stairs and closed the door behind her. I said, "You told me you had suspected for 3 months." She said, "Yes." I said, "Why did you come to the wedding?" She looked at me for a long second. "Because I had no proof," she said, "and because not coming would have required me to tell my parents why, and I was not ready to have that conversation without proof. And because I was actually hoping, Sarang, which I have been embarrassed about for 2 hours, that I was wrong, that I had been imagining things, that the way my brother had been behaving for 3 months was about something else. I was hoping against my own evidence that I was not going to have to be the person who found out I was right. And today I saw them, and I was right. I said, "I am sorry." She said, "You do not apologize to me. I apologize to you." She said, "I am going to order food. You have not eaten since this morning. I'm going to order soup, and I'm going to order rice, and I'm going to bring it to the guest room, and you are going to eat it. And then you are going to sleep. And tomorrow we will figure out the next thing." I said, "Okay." She said, "Go lie down. I will bring the food." I went back to the guest room. My mother was asleep. I sat on the edge of the bed in Linnea's borrowed sweatpants and the pullover that smelled like her apartment, and I looked at my hands. And I thought about the wedding ring I had not yet put on, and the wedding ring I was never going to put on. She knocked on the door 15 minutes later. She brought a tray with soup and rice and a cup of ginger tea, and she set it on the bedside table. And she did not look at me for too long. And she did not say anything that required me to respond. And she left. I ate. I did not cry yet. I lay down next to my mother on the guest room bed, and I looked at the ceiling in a room I had never slept in before, in an apartment that belonged to a woman whose presence in my life had just changed categories in a way I did not yet have words for. I fell asleep sometime after midnight. I woke up at 4 in the morning. My mother was still asleep. I went out into the apartment quietly. Linnea was on the couch. She was asleep. She had not gone to her own bedroom, which I realized was because she had not wanted to be further from the guest room than the couch, in case either of us needed anything in the night. Her laptop was still open on the coffee table. Her phone was on her chest. She had fallen asleep sitting upright and had slid sideways at some point, and she was in her shirt and her slacks and her bare feet. Her hair was across her face in a way that made her look 36 years old, instead of the severe 40-something in a gunmetal suit version of her that most people knew. I stood in the doorway for a long moment. I had never seen her like this. Nobody had ever seen her like this, probably. She was a woman who did not come unraveled in the presence of other people. She had the kind of composure that she wore as her outermost layer, and she had worn it all day with a precision that had gotten me out of a country club and into a safe room and through the first night. She had let that composure down in her own living room alone, because she had not wanted to leave the couch. I closed her laptop quietly. I took the phone off her chest and set it on the coffee table. I got a blanket from the linen closet. I remembered from last spring where the linen closet was, and I laid it over her carefully, and she did not wake up. I stood there for a moment longer. I thought about 3 months. I thought about the fact that she had said she had suspected for 3 months. I thought about how exhausting it must have been to carry that for 3 months, while also seeing me at family dinners, while also helping my mother with the seating chart, while also being the older sister of the groom. I thought about the way she had looked at me during the rehearsal dinner last night across the table in the gunmetal gray suit with her hair pinned and her hands folded and her face completely composed. She had been looking at me with the particular attention I had cataloged from her for 2 years, and I had thought at the time that it was just her attention, that this was how Linnea looked at people, completely. It was not how she looked at people, it was how she looked at me. I went back to the guest room. I got into bed next to my mother. I watched the ceiling get slightly lighter for an hour. Then I fell asleep again. When I woke up at 8, my mother was downstairs in the kitchen with Linnea, and they were not talking. They were just both drinking tea at the kitchen island in the soft morning light. Linnea's hair was pinned again. She looked up when I came in. "Your grandmother is awake," she said. "Your aunt called. She is asking for you." "Okay," I said. "We can go to the hotel whenever you are ready. I will drive you." I said, "I need to eat something first." Linnea said, "There is toast, there is fruit, there is cereal that your mother has opinions about. Sit." I sat. My mother touched my hand across the island and did not say anything. Linnea refilled the kettle and did not say anything. I ate toast in a kitchen that was not mine, in a shirt that was not mine, in a life that was not the life I had been living yesterday morning. My mother said, "Your tita called. Your Lola wants to fly home on Wednesday. She says 3 more days in the hotel, and then she wants her own bed." I said, "Okay, I will fly with her." My mother said, "Your tita has to go back to her practice in Manila, but she can route through Cebu if I travel with Lola the rest of the way." I said, "Okay, Ma." She said, "You will come with us." I looked at her. "I cannot come, Ma. I have the deposition on my research on the 15th. I have the grant renewal on the 20th. I have the apartment to sort out. I have Ben's things and my things and 2 sets of keys and a lease in both our names. I cannot do any of that from Cebu." My mother did not argue. "Where will you stay?" she said. I said, "I will find a place." Linnea said from the sink, "She can stay here." Neither of us spoke. Linnea turned around. "The guest room is available," she said. "I am in trial the next 3 weeks, which means I am out of the apartment from 7 to 9 most days. Sarang would have full use of the space. The arrangement is no trouble for me and would give Sarang time to sort out the longer-term question without having to make a bad decision quickly. My mother looked at her, then at me, then back at Linnea. "You are very kind, Ate Linnea." Linnea said, "I am not being kind. I am being practical. Kindness would be insisting. Practicality is offering and letting her decide." My mother said, "You are also being kind." Linnea did not argue. I went back to the guest room. I stood at the window and I looked at the park across the street, which was beginning to come alive with the specific quiet movement of a Sunday morning. A jogger, a woman with two small dogs, an older man on a bench with a paper. The ordinariness of it made me feel, for the first time since the bridal suite, that the world had not actually ended. The world had gone on. It was just that a particular version of it had not. I went back to the kitchen. Linnea was at the kitchen island reading something on her laptop. My mother had gone back to the guest room to lie down. The apartment was quiet. I said yes. Linnea looked up. "To the guest room, if the offer is real," she said. "The offer is real." I said, 3 weeks until I find something longer term. "I am going to pay you rent." She said, "You are not going to pay me rent." I said, "I am going to pay you rent." She said, "You are going to pay me for utilities, not rent. Utilities are $500 a month in this building. You can pay me $250 and we will call it even." I said, "$100 a month and you let me buy groceries." She said, "Okay." We went to the apartment that afternoon. My mother came with us. Ben was not there. Linnea had texted him an hour earlier to make sure he would not be. She had decided, without telling me, that I should have the option to go home today if I wanted to. The three of us stood in a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood I had lived in for 2 years, and we packed. Linnea did what I asked her to do and did not do what I had not asked her to do. My mother made decisions about the kitchen. I made decisions about the bedroom. We loaded everything into Linnea's car and a rental SUV that Linnea had booked before I told her to stop booking things, which I allowed because it had been booked before the conversation. On the kitchen counter, there was a letter. I did not open it in front of Linnea or my mother. I put it in my purse and I packed around it. When we got back to Linnea's apartment and my mother went to lie down, I took the letter out to the living room and I sat on the couch and I opened it. It was 4 pages. It was the letter I had known he would write. It was the apology and the explanation and the plea and the minimizing of what he had done and the reframing of what he had done and the request to talk and the statement that he still loved me and the insistence that 3 months was not really 3 months and the soft attempt to blame me for not seeing it coming. By page 3, I understood that I was not going to read page 4. I folded it up. I put it back in the envelope. Linnea came out of her bedroom. She was in soft clothes for the first time I had ever seen her in soft clothes. Dark gray joggers and a navy long-sleeved shirt, hair loose, barefoot. She was holding a book. She saw me on the couch with the envelope. She said, "Do you want me to read it?" I said, "No." She said, "Do you want to read it?" I said, "I read 3 pages. I did not read the 4th. She said, "What does he want?" I said, "He wants to talk." She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Nothing." She said, "Okay." She went to the leather chair across from the couch. She did not sit too close. She did not try to read over my shoulder. She opened her book on her lap and she did not actually read it. I noticed that. She just held it open and kept her hands busy and gave me the kind of presence that was not demanding anything. I said my mother flies with my grandmother to Cebu on Wednesday. She said, "Okay." I said, "I am going to stay in your guest room for 3 weeks." "Okay, I am not going to talk to Ben for those 3 weeks." "Okay, I am going to ask my lawyer to handle the apartment lease." She said, "I can recommend a lawyer, not me. A different attorney, a good one. Someone whose only job is to be on your side of the paperwork. Her name is Margarita Holt." We sat there for a long time. She did not read the book. I did not read the letter again. The apartment was quiet, in a way apartments only get in the late afternoon on a Sunday, when 2 people are in the same room and neither of them is talking and neither of them needs to. At some point I said, "Linnea." She said, "Yes." I said, "Last night you said you were glad I was there." A pause. She said, "Yes." I said, "I am not going to ask you what you meant." She said, "Okay." I said, "I am not going to ask you for a while." She said, "Okay, I want you to know that I heard you." A longer pause. She closed the book. She set it on the side table. She said, "Thank you for not asking." I said, "You are welcome." My mother left for the airport on Wednesday morning. Linnea drove us both. My mother held my face in her hands in the departure lane, and she said in Cebuano, the way she said things when she wanted them to be only between us, "Anak, take care of yourself and take care of her too." I said, "Ma." My mother said, "I am old, and I have stopped pretending to be subtle, remember?" I remember. She said, "I am also not wrong." I said, "I know you are not wrong. I am not ready." She said, "I did not say be ready. I said take care of her. She has been taking care of you. Someone should be taking care of her." I said, "Okay, Ma." She kissed my forehead. She walked through the automatic doors with my tita. I stood there until they were out of sight. Linnea stayed in the car. She had, correctly, decided that the goodbye was not hers to be part of. When I got back in the car, she said, "Do you want to go home or do you want to drive somewhere?" I said, "Drive somewhere." She drove. She did not tell me where she was going. She did not ask me where I wanted to go. She just drove out of the airport, onto the parkway, past the exit for her apartment, past the exit for the city, into the hills to the north where there were no buildings and no billboards. The road narrowed and curved. The afternoon light was the particular gold that only happens in November. She pulled over at an overlook. She stopped the car. She did not turn the engine off. She said, "This is where I come when I cannot be in the apartment." I said, "How often do you come here?" She said, "Once a month, sometimes twice." I said, "Alone?" She said, "Yes." I looked out the windshield. The hills rolled out below us in their long, rough way. The sky was the color of a bruise healing. I thought about a woman who drove 35 minutes out of the city once a month to sit in her car at an overlook by herself and watch the light change. I thought about the fact that she had driven me here instead of telling me about it. I said, "Thank you for bringing me." She said, "Thank you for letting me." We sat there for a long time. The light changed. The hills got bluer. Somewhere in the middle of it, without making a decision about it, I reached across the center console and I put my hand over her hand on the gear shift. She did not move. She did not turn her hand over. She did not pull away. She just let me keep my hand there. It was, I understood later, the first time I had touched her on purpose in 2 years. After a while, when the light had almost gone and the hills were the color of deep water, she turned her hand under mine and she laced her fingers through mine and she held my hand back and she did not look at me while she did it. And I did not look at her. We both looked at the hills. That was the thing that made it possible, that neither of us had to look at the other one while our hands found out what they were going to do. She said, "I am not going to ask you for anything, Sarang." I said, "I know." She said, "I want you to know I am not." I said, "I know, Linnea. I know." The next 3 weeks were the strangest time of my life and the most peaceful. Linnea went to trial at 7 in the morning. I heard the shower at 5:30. I heard the coffee grinder at 6. I heard the door at 6:50. She was a person of absolute routine in the morning and a person of no routine in the evening because she did not know when she would be home, and she had stopped pretending she knew. I worked from her dining table. My research was the kind of work that could be done anywhere with a laptop in a quiet room. Her dining table had excellent light and a view of the park, and a particular cedar and citrus smell that had, by day 3, become the smell I associated with being able to think clearly. I worked on the grant renewal. I did the deposition. I called my mother every night at 8. I called my grandmother every Sunday. I did not call Ben. I read his second letter, which arrived on day 6. I did not read his third letter, which arrived on day 11. I did not read his fourth letter, which arrived on day 15. That was information I was collecting about him. The fact that he had moved from calling to letters. The fact that the letters had gotten shorter and more aggrieved. It was information I did not need to do anything with yet. I made dinner on the night she came home. Not elaborate dinners, pasta, soup. the Filipino comfort food my mother had taught me to make with whatever was in the kitchen. Linnea came home at 8 or 9 or twice 11. She would drop her bag by the door and she would come into the kitchen in her suit with the jacket over her arm, and she would sit at the kitchen island while I finished whatever I was making. She would tell me about her day, not in the performative way that people tell each other about their days, but in the ordinary way that people talk when there is a pot on the stove, and neither of them needs the conversation to be more than it is. On day 19, she came home at 8. She had had a long day. I could see it in her shoulders. She dropped her bag. She came into the kitchen. I was stirring a pot of tinola, and the windows were open onto the park, and the smell of ginger and green papaya was filling the apartment. She stopped in the doorway of the kitchen, and she looked at me, and she said, "I forgot this is what your cooking smells like." I said, "I have made tinola twice since I moved in." She said, "I know. I forgot in the specific way people forget things when they do not want to." I said, "Linnea." She said, "I am going to sit down." She sat at the kitchen island. She put her forearms on the counter. She put her forehead on her forearms. I turned the heat down on the pot. I wiped my hands on the dish towel. I came around the island. I said, "What happened today?" She said, "Nothing happened today. Today was a normal day." I won emotion. I had dinner with a junior associate. I came home. I said, "What happened, Linnea?" She lifted her head. She looked at me. I was standing maybe 2 feet from her, closer than I had stood to her at any point in 3 weeks. She said, "I came home and I smelled ginger and I realized I have never come home to someone cooking ginger in my kitchen before, in 42 years of my life. And I sat down because my knees did a thing my knees have not done in a long time." I looked at her. I said, "Linnea." She said, "I am sorry. I am not going to ask you for anything. I told you I would not. I am not." I said, "I know you are not." I stepped closer. She did not move. She was sitting on the stool, and I was standing beside it. And we were close enough now that I could see the particular way her hair fell loose from the pin she had used that morning, which had come half undone sometime during the day, which was the thing she was probably most self-conscious about, and the thing I had not been able to stop looking at every time it happened in the last 3 weeks. I said, "Linnea, look at me." She looked at me. I said, "I am going to tell you something. I am going to tell you once, clearly, so you do not have to wonder." She said, "Okay." I said, "I am not ready. That has not changed. I am still 3 weeks out of the worst day of my life, and I am not going to be ready for a while." She said, "I know." I said, "But I have been paying attention to you for 2 years, Linnea, and I was paying attention before I understood I was paying attention. And I understood what I was paying attention to the night I stood in your living room at 4 in the morning and saw you asleep on the couch with a blanket I had put on you myself." Her breath did a thing. I said, "I am not ready. But when I am ready, it is going to be you. I want you to know that, so you can stop wondering whether you are being the world's most convenient kindness. You are not. I have been waiting for a thing I did not have the name for, and the thing is you. And I have been waiting for you since you offered me a lift to my train 2 years ago and did not mind when I said no." She closed her eyes, just for a second. When she opened them, they were wet, which was the first time in 36 years of her life, probably, that anyone had ever seen her eyes be wet. She said, "Sarang." I said, "Do not say anything. Do not commit to anything. Do not ask me for anything. I just wanted you to know." She said, "Okay." I said, "I am going to finish the tinola." She said, "Okay." I went back to the stove. I stirred the pot. She sat at the kitchen island with her forearms on the counter, and she did not put her head down again, and she did not pretend her eyes were not wet. After a long minute, she said, "Sarong." I said, "Yes." She said, "Can I stand up?" I said, "Yes." She stood up. She came around the island. She stopped behind me, not touching, close enough that I could feel the heat of her through my shirt and smell the cedar and citrus of her and the long day of her and the small, real warmth of her standing in the kitchen she had lived in alone for 9 years. She put her hands on my waist, just her hands, on my waist, through the fabric of the sweatshirt I was wearing, which was one of hers. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against the back of my head, between my shoulder blades. She exhaled once, slowly, like a woman who had been holding a breath for a long time and had finally decided it was safe to let it out. She did not kiss me. She did not turn me around. She did not ask me anything. She just stood there, her forehead against the back of my head and her hands on my waist, and she breathed. I kept stirring the pot. My hand was steady. I was surprised it was steady. The rest of me was a thing that was not steady at all. After a long while, she lifted her head. She did not step back. She kept one hand on my waist, low, the way you keep your hand on a person when you have decided you are going to keep being in the room with them. She reached past me with the other hand, and she turned the heat down another notch on the stove, because she knew from 3 weeks of watching me cook that I always left it one notch too high at this stage. She said, against my hair, very quietly, "I am going to let you finish cooking." I said, "Okay." She said, "I am going to sit at the island." I said, "Okay." She said, "Thank you." She stepped back. The space where her hand had been on my waist was warm for a long time after. I stayed in the guest room for 3 more weeks. At the end of 6 weeks, I signed a lease on my own apartment, 4 blocks from Linnea's building, close enough to walk, far enough to have my own front door. Linnea helped me move in because I asked her to. She carried boxes, and she hung a mirror, and she did not try to stay the night, and I did not ask her to. When she left, she kissed the top of my head at the doorway, which was the first time she had kissed any part of me on purpose. It was the right kiss for the moment. We both knew it. The first real kiss happened 4 months later at the Overlook in March, when the hills were starting to come back green. I had finished my grant. She had finished her trial. We had been going to dinner twice a week, and the Overlook on Sundays. We had been learning each other the slow way. The way you learn something, you want to get right. She kissed me first. I had known she would. I had told her in the kitchen the night of the tinola that I was not ready, and she had waited, and she had kept waiting. When I was ready, I had told her I was ready. On a Wednesday over dinner, and she had said, "Okay," and she had not rushed it. On Sunday at the Overlook, she had turned in the driver's seat and looked at me for a long moment. I had said, "Yes, Linnea," and she had kissed me. It was not frantic. It was nothing like frantic. It was patient in the specific way that everything about her was patient. Her hand came up to my jaw, careful, like she was handling a thing she had wanted to handle for years and had promised herself she would handle slowly if she ever got to. Her mouth was warm. Her breath caught once. She pulled back 1/4 of an inch and looked at my face, then came back and kissed me again. And that kiss was different. I put my hand against her chest and felt her heart going, 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 like a woman who had been carrying a thing for longer than I had known her and had finally been allowed to set it down. When we pulled apart, the light was almost gone, and the hills were the color of deep water again, the way they had been the first time, when my hand had found hers on the gear shift. She said, "Sarang." I said, "Yes." She said, "I was going to wait forever, if I had to." I said, "I know." She said, "I am glad I did not have to." I said, "Me too." We drove back. This time I held her hand the whole way, and she kept both hands on the wheel when the road curved, and I let her. When we got to the city, she parked in her garage and walked me up to her door. We stood at the doorway for a moment, and she kissed me again, once, softly, and said, "Go home, Sarong. I will see you tomorrow." I said, "Tomorrow." I walked the 4 blocks to my own apartment. I went inside. I stood in the middle of my living room, in the particular quiet of my own front door, and my own lamp and my own bookshelf. And I thought about the woman who had driven me home for my wedding day, and the woman who had kissed me at an Overlook 4 months later, and I understood they were the same woman. I called my mother. My mother answered on the second ring. It was 8 in the morning in Cebu. She said, Anak. I said, Ma. She said, You are calling in the middle of the night. I said, It is not the middle of the night here, Ma. It is 9 in the evening. She said, What happened? I said, Linnea kissed me. My mother was quiet for a moment. She said, In Cebuano, finally. I said, Ma. She said, I have been waiting for this phone call for 4 months, Anak. Your Lola asks me every Sunday. I said, You could have not waited so obviously. She said, I am old and I have stopped pretending to be subtle. How many times must I say this? I laughed. I had not laughed in a while. It was a surprise to hear myself do it. I said, I love you, Ma. She said, I love you, Anak. Tell Ate Linnea I say hello. Tell her I said thank you. I said, For what? She said, For being the woman who came up the back stairs. I have been meaning to tell her. Tell her now. I texted Linnea. I wrote, My mother says thank you for being the woman who came up the back stairs. She wrote back in less than a minute. She wrote, Tell your mother she is welcome. Tell her I am the one who is thankful. I read it twice. I put the phone down. I stood in my living room in the quiet that was mine, and I thought about the bridal suite a lifetime ago, and the door that had opened without a knock, and the woman in the gunmetal gray suit who had closed that door behind her and had decided in the space of 15 minutes that she was going to be the person in that building who was on my side. She had been on my side every day since. She was on my side tonight, 4 blocks away, probably sitting on her leather chair with a book she was not really reading, already wondering if she had come on too strong at the Overlook. She would not text. She would just sit there and wait for tomorrow. And tomorrow, I would walk the 4 blocks back to her apartment, and I would use the key she had given me 3 weeks ago and never asked for back. And I would let myself into her kitchen at 7 in the morning before she went to work, and I would make her coffee the way she liked it, and I would hand her the mug, and I would say, Good morning, Linnea, and she would say, Good morning, Sarang, and neither of us would make a ceremony of it, because we had been finding our way here for 2 years and 4 months, and we had all the time in the world now to stop rushing. I was home. I was finally home. My grandmother had been right about the eucalyptus. It did look like the bush in her mother's garden in Cebu. And that was the thing about Linnea Ashford. She understood.